My best friend slept with my abusive ex and tried to ruin my life online, so I cut her off for good. 2 years later, she came crawling back after he turned on her too. I spent Thanksgiving crying my eyes out while cooking chicken nuggets in McDonald's. You see, I had volunteered to cover a shift because I'd gone no contact with my family, and Tyrese, my only friend at the time, was hanging out with his dad. Tyrese knew I was crying though. When he asked to FaceTime, I refused to turn my camera on, but my voice still trembled with each word. The fluorescent lights of the kitchen made everything look harsh and unforgiving as I stood there, the smell of frying oil clinging to my uniform and hair. Every few minutes, I'd wipe my tears with the back of my hand, careful not to let my manager see me breaking down during the holiday rush. That's why he invited me to hang out with his friends afterward. I remember the exact moment he suggested it. I was sitting in my car in the empty McDonald's parking lot, the engine running just for the heat, watching families through the windows of nearby restaurants, all laughing and celebrating together. The invitation felt like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. None of them seemed to be aroused pieces of poop, which is rare for the male species, and they actually seemed like they genuinely liked each other. I could tell from the way they playfully shoved each other when I first walked into the diner, their easy laughter filling the space. The restaurant was one of those 24-hour places with vinyl booths and laminated menus that had seen better days. Christmas lights had been strung up around the windows, casting everything in a soft, multicolored glow. There was just one thing. There was only one other girl. Now, I'm usually a girl's girl, the type to insist on going to the bathroom together even if I don't need to use it, the type to take photos when I think someone looks good, from 100 different angles. I've always believed in women supporting women, especially in groups dominated by guys, so I automatically treated Vanessa as if she was my friend, gave her a huge hug, my arms wrapping around her slender frame as if we'd known each other forever, told her I'd pay for her meal, and defended her whenever Tyrese or the other guys made fun of her. The diner smelled like maple syrup and coffee, and the jukebox in the corner was playing some old 80s song that made the whole scene feel like something out of a movie. I slid into the booth next to Vanessa, our shoulders touching, ready to form that instant female bond. I thought she was going to return the favor, or at least be somewhat nice to me, but apparently little Miss Vanessa had other plans. Halfway through the meal, I waved down the waitress so I could order an extra side dish. My stomach was growling after the long shift at McDonald's, and the plate of fries I'd ordered hadn't been enough to satisfy my hunger. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a kind smile, had just pulled out her notepad when Vanessa spoke up. "I really don't think you need to eat all that," Vanessa said while laughing, her voice dripping with fake concern. My face flushed with heat, and no one reacted. The waitress's pen hovered over her pad, her eyes darting between us uncertainly. The conversation at the table didn't even pause. The guys were deep in a discussion about some video game, oblivious to what had just happened. But instead of giving up, she doubled down. "You heard? I said I don't think you need to eat all that." Her voice cut through the diner noise like a knife, loud enough that a couple at a nearby table glanced over with curious expressions. Tyrese looked up from his plate and did a half smile. The rest of the table laughed briefly before going back to eating. I just stared at her blankly, the humiliation burning in my chest. The waitress mumbled something about coming back later and hurried away, leaving me sitting there with my cheeks on fire and my appetite suddenly gone. But I didn't have any female friends at the time, and I know how hard it is to find good ones. The loneliness of the past few months had been crushing, eating lunch alone at work, spending weekends by myself in my tiny apartment, with only Netflix and my houseplants for company. So instead of distancing myself from her, I followed the law of reciprocity. I decided that maybe she was just having a bad day, or perhaps her sense of humor was different from mine. Maybe if I showed her kindness, she'd warm up to me. The next time we all met up, I showed up with her favorite box of Dubai chocolate that she had mentioned the last time, the expensive kind with gold flakes on top. I'd spent nearly an hour at the specialty store picking it out, making sure it was exactly the one she'd described. The box was wrapped in elegant gold paper, and I'd even added a small card with her name on it. I handed it to her with a smile as we gathered outside the movie theater, the neon lights reflecting off the wet pavement after a light rain. "Thanks," she said, barely glancing at the gift, her voice flat and disinterested. She tossed it into her designer purse without even opening it, like I'd handed her a receipt or some other piece of trash. The casual dismissal stung, but I pushed the feeling down. But I didn't want to be the person who only gives so other people make me feel special. So I just replied to her entitlement with a bright, "No problem," before redirecting my attention to the guys. My voice came out a little too loud, a little too cheerful, but no one seemed to notice except maybe Tyrese, who gave me a curious look. Unfortunately for Vanessa, they loved me. I could tell because they were laughing at my jokes until their eyes watered, and giving me all the lore of their friend group and personal lives, the kind of stories that make you feel like you've been there all along. Stories about their disastrous camping trip last summer, when Logan forgot to secure the food and raccoons invaded their site at 3 a.m. Tales of their high school days when Tyrese accidentally set off the fire alarm trying to impress his crush. Inside jokes about the incident that apparently involved a stolen shopping cart, 3 cans of whipped cream, and the local mall security. The movie theater lobby was crowded and noisy, with the smell of buttery popcorn filling the air and the sound of arcade games beeping in the background. As we waited in line for tickets, the guys clustered around me, including me in their conversation while Vanessa stood slightly apart, scrolling through her phone with an increasingly sour expression. But after an hour, I realized Vanessa hadn't spoken in a while, and I didn't want her to feel left out. When I turned to her, she had her arms crossed, and she was staring at the ground with a pout on her face that would make a toddler look mature. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped impatiently against her arm, and her bottom lip jutted out dramatically. "So, Vanessa, how did your gym session go today? You ate in your Instagram story." I tried, genuinely interested in the workout routine she'd posted about earlier. The photos had shown her in a matching neon workout set, posing with weights in what looked like an upscale fitness center. "It was fine," she cut me off, her voice like ice. The two words hung in the air between us, sharp and final, making it clear she had no interest in continuing the conversation. And suddenly she reinserted herself back into the conversation. She locked eyes with Tyrese, twirled a strand of hair around her finger and said, "Isn't Jade so effing annoying?" Her voice had transformed completely, now playful and teasing, with a musical lilt that hadn't been there seconds ago. "Yes, I can't stand her," he responded. It was a joke he always made, but Vanessa was eating it up like it was gospel truth. Her eyes lit up and she giggled, leaning into him slightly as if they were sharing some private joke at my expense. Suddenly all the boys got up to go to the bathroom at once. Do guys actually do this, or is it just girls? They moved as a pack, heading across the lobby toward the restrooms, leaving Vanessa and me me alone by the concession stand. The awkward silence stretched between us like a physical thing, and her demeanor completely switched. "You look so pretty, Jade. Thank you for always liking my Instagram stories," she gushed, her voice suddenly syrupy sweet. A wave of shock ran through my body. The transformation was so sudden and complete that for a moment I wondered if I'd imagined the coldness from just minutes before. "Oh, thanks," I said, before asking her to sit beside me, trying to extend an olive branch. I patted the empty seat next to me, hoping that maybe, just maybe, we could start over and form a real friendship. And that's when the guys came back. They approached in a group, laughing about something, their footsteps echoing on the tile floor of the lobby. Tyrese headed toward the seat next to me, but before he could reach it, Vanessa jumped up. "Sorry I took your seat, Tyrese. Jade was begging me to be near her. We both know how needy she can be." Some of the other guys breathed a laugh. Meanwhile, Vanessa was grinning so hard I thought her eyebrows were going to fall off her forehead. Her eyes darted between Tyrese and me, watching for my reaction. The words hit me like a slap. I felt my face grow hot again, but this time with anger rather than embarrassment. The casual cruelty of it, the deliberate attempt to make me look pathetic in front of my new friends. It was calculated and mean. The theater lights dimmed just then, saving me from having to respond, but my enjoyment of the movie was ruined before it even began. But before I showed her how low I was willing to go, I wanted to play with her. So the next time we all hung out, I fed her the bait. We were at the mall, wandering through Hollister with its overwhelming cologne smell and dimly lit interior. The guys were half-heartedly looking through graphic tees while Vanessa and I browsed the women's section. "Hey, this t-shirt looks so nice on you, Vanessa," I said while we shopped in Hollister with all the guys nearby, my voice deliberately loud enough for everyone to hear. I held up a simple white tee with the store logo. Nothing special, but something that would complement her olive skin tone. "Ugh, that won't fit me. It'll be like a whole butt blanket on me. I'm way too small for my own good." By the last sentence, she was practically shouting at the top of her lungs, facing away from me and staring directly at the guys, her eyes wide with desperation for their attention. I almost vomited from the secondhand embarrassment that crawled up my spine. The store associate folding clothes nearby looked up with raised eyebrows, and an older woman shopping with her teenage daughter shot us a disapproving glance. But Vanessa didn't seem to notice or care. Her eyes were fixed on the guys, gauging their reaction to her announcement about her petite frame. When we passed by a stand selling Dubai chocolate, the exact same one I had gotten her, I told Tyrese to buy one for her since Vanessa's birthday was coming up. The mall was crowded with weekend shoppers, the air conditioning blasting against the heat outside, and the chocolate display looked elegant among the usual mall kiosks selling phone cases and cheap jewelry. "OMG, you are actually the best!" Her face lit up so much it could have fueled the electricity for the entire globe. She then gave a stiff and uncomfortable Tyrese the biggest hug I had ever seen, while he stood there like a mannequin, arms pinned to his sides. His eyes met mine over her shoulder, wide with confusion and a silent plea for help. Well, if she wanted to make our friendship a competition, then I was all for it. When she flirted with a dusty random to get his number and said, "Some of us just don't need to try," I got the numbers of 10 dudes right in front of her. I didn't even want their numbers. Most of them looked like they hadn't washed their hair in days, but the look on her face was worth it. Each time a guy handed me his phone to put in my contact info, I could feel Vanessa's glare burning into the side of my face. When she pulled Tyrese away while he was in the middle of talking to me, I grabbed his hand and told him to give me a piggyback ride. The mall security guard gave us a warning look as Tyrese reluctantly hoisted me onto his back, but it was worth it to see Vanessa's expression shift from smug to furious in the span of seconds. By the end of the day, she was completely silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. It was beautiful, honestly. The drive back from the mall was quiet, with Vanessa staring out the window the entire time, refusing to join in when the guys started a heated debate about which fast food place had the best fries. Unfortunately, it didn't last long, because just 2 days later, I got the notification that she had tagged me in a post on Instagram. I was at work, on my break, sitting in the McDonald's break room with its flickering fluorescent light and the perpetual smell of fry oil. My stomach dropped as soon as I saw her username in my notifications. It was a photo of her and my ex kissing, captioned with, "Sometimes you just need an upgrade." But it wasn't just any ex. It was the one that I had filed a police report against. The one that everyone knew had physically abused me multiple times, leaving bruises that took weeks to fade. The bruises had been in places easy to hide. My ribs, my upper arms, once on my back where he'd shoved me into a doorknob. But the emotional scars were harder to conceal. In the photo, they were at some rooftop bar, the city lights twinkling behind them, her arms wrapped around his neck while he held her waist. They looked like any happy couple, if you didn't know the truth about who he really was. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my phone, and I felt the chicken nuggets I'd eaten earlier threatening to come back up. The feeling lasted exactly 3 days. On the 4th day, I woke up to my phone exploding with notifications. Not from Vanessa directly, I'd blocked her, but from everyone else. Tyrese had sent me 15 texts in a row, each more urgent than the last. "Jade, wake up, check Vanessa's TikTok. Now. I'm so sorry. This is beyond effed up." My stomach dropped like I was on a roller coaster. The early morning sunlight was streaming through my thin curtains, casting patterns on my bedspread, but the peaceful scene contrasted sharply with the dread building inside me. With shaking hands, I created a burner account to view her profile. The most recent video had over 50,000 views already, and was climbing fast. The thumbnail showed my ex, Derek, with a somber expression, sitting on what looked like a therapist's couch. I pressed play, my heart hammering against my ribs. "So, as a survivor of false accusations," Derek began, his voice carefully modulated to sound wounded, "I wanted to share my story." He was wearing a soft blue sweater that made him look gentle and approachable, the same sweater he'd been wearing the first time he'd shoved me against a wall. The video cut to Vanessa, her eyes wide and sympathetic, like a cartoon character trying to look innocent. "And I'm here to support him through his healing journey. No one should have their reputation destroyed by someone who refuses to take accountability for their own actions." She placed her hand on his arm in a gesture of solidarity, her French manicured nails standing out against the blue of his sweater. Derek nodded gravely. "My ex-girlfriend Jade has serious mental health issues that she refuses to address. When I tried to break up with her because of her possessive behavior, she threatened to tell everyone I abused her." His eyes, the same eyes that had gone cold and empty right before his fist connected with my stomach, now filled with manufactured tears. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone. This couldn't be happening. The room suddenly felt too small, the air too thick to breathe. Outside my window, a car horn honked, and someone's dog barked. Normal sounds from a world that was continuing as if mine wasn't falling apart. The police police report was filed maliciously, Derek continued, after she deliberately injured herself during an argument where I was trying to leave. I have witnesses who saw her behavior that night. His voice cracked at just the right moment, a performance worthy of an Oscar. The video cut to a girl I didn't recognize, her face blurred. Yeah, I saw her that night. She was screaming at him, throwing things. When he tried to leave, she grabbed his keys and then slammed her own arm into the door. It was crazy. The girl's voice was high and nervous, her words coming out in a rush as if she was afraid of forgetting her lines. I felt like I was going to throw up. That witness was lying. There had been no witnesses that night, just me, Derek, and the neighbors who called 911 after hearing me scream when he threw me against the wall so hard the picture frames rattled. I remember the sound of glass cracking as one of the frames fell, the sharp pain in my back, the look in his eyes that told me this time might be the last time. The comments under the video were a nightmare. I knew a girl like this in college. Total psycho. Men can be victims too. This is why no one believes real victims, because of girls like Jade. Hundreds of strangers weighing in on a situation they knew nothing about, their words cutting deeper with each scroll. Tyrese called me as I was still staring at my phone in horror. "I'm coming over," he said, not waiting for a response. His voice was tight with anger, not at me, but at what was happening. 20 minutes later, he was at my door with coffee and a grim expression, his eyes shadowed with concern. He'd driven fast. The coffee was still steaming hot, and his jacket was only half zipped, as if he'd rushed out without fully getting ready. The familiar smell of the caramel latte he'd brought me, my favorite, was a small comfort in the storm. "Have you seen the other videos?" he asked as he stepped into my apartment, his sneakers squeaking slightly on the linoleum floor of my entryway. The morning light highlighted the worry lines on his forehead, making him look older than his 23 years. "There are more?" My voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. I clutched the warm coffee cup like a lifeline, the heat seeping into my cold fingers. He nodded, looking sick. "She's been posting them all night. There's one where Derek shows evidence that you were the abusive one. Old texts taken completely out of context. And there's another one." He trailed off, his jaw tightening as he struggled to continue. "What?" I whispered, cold dread seeping into my bones. The coffee in my stomach turned sour, and I set the cup down on my small kitchen counter before I could drop it. "She somehow got hold of your voicemail to the police. The one where you called to ask about dropping the charges because you were scared he'd retaliate. She's spinning it as proof you knew the allegations were false." Tyrese ran a hand through his short dark hair, his frustration evident in every movement. I sank onto my couch, my legs unable to support me anymore. That call had been made 3 days after the incident, when Derek's friends had started driving by my apartment at all hours, revving their engines and shouting my name. I'd been terrified and called to ask about my options. The officer had convinced me not to drop the charges, explaining that this kind of intimidation was common in domestic violence cases. And now Vanessa was using it against me. The couch cushions sagged beneath me, the familiar creak of the springs offering no comfort today. Through my thin curtains, I could see people walking their dogs, heading to work, living normal lives while mine was being systematically destroyed online. "This is slander," Tyrese said firmly, pacing my small living room, his footsteps heavy with anger. "You could sue them." His sneakers left slight marks on my carpet with each turn, but I couldn't bring myself to care about something so trivial right now. "With what money?" I laughed bitterly. "I work at McDonald's, Tyrese. I can barely afford rent." My apartment, with its mismatched furniture and water stain on the ceiling, was evidence enough of my financial situation. The stack of bills on my coffee table, some with "final notice" stamped in red, underscored the point. My phone buzzed with a text from my manager at McDonald's. "Need to talk to you before your shift today. Come in 30 minutes early." The message glowed ominously on my screen. Another problem to add to the growing pile. "Great," I muttered. "Now what?" I showed Tyrese the text, watching his expression darken further. When I arrived at work, Marco's usually friendly face was creased with concern. He led me to the back office, away from the morning prep crew, the smell of frying oil and cleaning solution making my stomach turn. The office was tiny, barely big enough for the desk and 2 chairs it contained, with motivational posters peeling at the corners and a calendar still showing last month. "Jade, I've been getting calls," he began awkwardly. "About you." He couldn't quite meet my eyes, his gaze fixed on the employee schedule pinned to the corkboard behind me. My heart sank. "Let me guess. Someone saying I'm unstable and dangerous?" The fluorescent light overhead buzzed faintly, casting harsh shadows across Marco's troubled face. He looked surprised. "So you know about this?" His fingers tapped nervously on the desk between us, his wedding ring making a soft clicking sound against the laminate surface. "It's my ex and his new girlfriend. They're spreading lies about me online because I reported him for domestic violence last year." The words came out flat and tired. I was exhausted from explaining, from defending myself against accusations that shouldn't need defending. Marco's expression softened slightly. "Look, I believe you, but corporate is concerned about the social media attention. Some customers have been calling to complain about having an abuser handling their food." He winced as he said it, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "An abuser?" I repeated incredulously. "They're calling me the abuser now?" My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm, and I saw Marco glance nervously at the thin office door, worried others might hear. "I fought for you," Marco insisted, "but they're putting you on administrative leave until this blows over." "Paid leave," he added quickly, seeing my expression. I made sure of that. His eyes pleaded for understanding, for me not to blame him for a decision that had clearly come from higher up. I should have been grateful, but all I felt was numb. "How long?" The question came out barely above a whisper, as if speaking it too loudly would make the answer worse. 2 weeks to start. "I'm sorry, Jade." Marco handed me an official letter detailing the terms of my leave, the corporate letterhead stark and impersonal at the top of the page. I walked out of McDonald's feeling like I was in a nightmare. My one source of stability, my job, was now compromised. And it was only the beginning. The parking lot seemed to stretch endlessly before me, the familiar golden arches overhead now feeling like they were mocking me rather than welcoming me. Over the next few days, Vanessa's campaign escalated. She and Derek appeared on a popular podcast that specialized in exposing false accusations. They told their version of events, painting me as an obsessive ex who couldn't let go. Derek cried on cue when describing how his life had been ruined by my allegations, his voice cracking at all the right moments. The podcast host, a man with a history of dismissing domestic violence claims, ate it up. "This is why we need to be skeptical of women who cry abuse," he said, his voice smug. "The real victims here are men like Derek whose lives are destroyed by vindictive exes." His words slithered through my earbuds as I listened, each one hitting like a physical blow. The fallout was immediate and devastating. People I barely knew were sending me hateful messages. Old classmates from high school were sharing the videos, adding their own comments about how they always knew there was something off about me. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications, each one a fresh wound, a new betrayal from someone I thought had known better. Even worse, some of the guys from our friend group were starting to waver. I don't know what to believe anymore, Logan texted me. The evidence they're showing seems pretty convincing. His message arrived late at night when the loneliness was already crushing. The betrayal of someone I'd thought was becoming a friend made it almost unbearable. Only Tyrese and his cousin Tyrone remained steadfastly in my corner. Tyrone came over one evening with takeout and a determined expression. "We need a counter strategy," he said, spreading containers of Chinese food across my coffee table, the aroma of garlic and soy sauce filling my apartment. "They're controlling the narrative right now." The smell of the food reminded me I hadn't eaten all day, but my stomach was too knotted with anxiety to feel hungry. Outside, rain had started to fall, droplets racing down my windows and blurring the streetlights into smears of color. "What am I supposed to do?" I asked, pushing the food around with my fork. I'd barely eaten in days. My favorite sweater, once snug, now hung loosely from my shoulders. If I respond publicly, I look defensive. If I stay silent, I look guilty. It's exactly what happened before. "The difference is now you have us," Tyrese said firmly, "and we have evidence that Vanessa planned this whole thing." His voice carried a confidence I wished I could feel, his eyes bright with determination as he pulled out his phone to show me something. Tyrone nodded, his eyes bright with purpose. "Plus, I've been doing some digging. That witness in the video, she's Derek's cousin. I found pictures of them together at a family reunion last year." He turned his laptop around to show me the evidence, a Facebook photo album from Johnson Family Reunion 2022, with Derek and the witness standing side by side, his arm around her shoulders. A tiny spark of hope flickered in my chest. "So we can prove she's lying?" The rain outside intensified, drumming against the roof in a steady rhythm that somehow made the moment feel more significant. "It's a start," Tyrone said, "but we need more. We need to show that this isn't just about you versus them. It's about a pattern of behavior." His fingers flew over his keyboard, pulling up more social media profiles, more evidence of connections between the people in Vanessa's videos. We spent the next few hours strategizing. Tyrone, who worked in IT, helped me secure all my accounts with stronger passwords. Tyrese contacted the detective who had handled my case, asking if there was anything that could be done about the public smear campaign. The rain continued outside, creating a cocoon of sound around us as we worked. The world beyond my apartment temporarily held at bay. But just as we were starting to feel like we had a plan, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. The guys fell silent, watching my face for clues about who was calling. "Is this Jade?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar but somehow weary in a way I recognized. There was a quality to it, a certain flatness, a careful control, that I'd heard in my own voice after Derek. "Yes, who's this?" I pressed the phone closer to my ear, straining to hear over the rain. "My name is Hannah. You don't know me, but I dated Derek before you did." The word sent a chill down my spine despite the warmth of my apartment. My heart skipped a hit. "Hannah?" Tyrese and Tyrone exchanged glances, picking up on the change in my tone. "I saw the videos they're posting about you. It's the same playbook he used with me. The gaslighting, the public smear campaign when I tried to leave. I never filed a police report, but I should have." Her voice cracked slightly on the last words, heavy with regret. Tears welled in my eyes. "Why are you calling me?" I grabbed a tissue from the box on my coffee table, dabbing at my eyes before the tears could fall. "Because I believe you, and I want to help." The simple declaration, "I believe you," hit me harder than I expected. After days of being called a liar, of having my experience questioned and dismissed, those 3 words felt like oxygen when I'd been drowning. Hannah wasn't the only one. Over the next few days, 3 more women reached out, all former girlfriends of Derek's, all with similar stories. None had filed reports, but they all recognized the tactics being used against me. The pattern was so clear, so consistent, it was like they were all describing the same nightmare. Grace had dated Derek in college. He'd isolated her from friends, then convinced everyone she was mentally unstable when she finally left him. She described how he'd gradually separated her from her support system, first with small comments about her friends. "Do you really think she has your best interests at heart?" Then with more direct manipulation, "If you go to that party instead of staying with me, we're done." Heather had only gone on a few dates with him, but when she tried to break it off, he'd shown up at her workplace so often she had to change jobs. He'd just be there, she told me over the phone, her voice still tense with the memory, in the parking lot, or the lobby, or sitting at a table in the cafe across from my office. Always with some excuse about just happening to be in the area. And Laura had the most disturbing story. Derek had threatened to release intimate photos of her if she told anyone about his behavior. "I was so ashamed," she admitted when we met for coffee. "I blamed myself for trusting him with those pictures. It took me years of therapy to understand that the shame belonged to him, not me. He's a textbook abuser," Grace told me over coffee. She'd driven 2 hours to meet me in person, her eyes haunted with memories I understood too well. The cafe was quiet in the mid-afternoon lull, just a few other customers tapping on laptops or reading books. And Vanessa is either his victim or his accomplice. Either way, they're dangerous together. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't alone, I wasn't crazy. And most importantly, I had witnesses who could corroborate that Derek had a pattern of abusive behavior. The weight that had been crushing me began to lift slightly, allowing me to take a full breath for the first time in what felt like forever. But just as things were looking up, Vanessa escalated again. I was at Tyrese's apartment going through the evidence we'd collected when his phone buzzed with a notification. His face went pale as he read it, the color draining away so quickly I knew it had to be bad. "What?" I asked, instantly alert. The comfortable feeling of safety I'd had in his apartment evaporated in an instant. "Vanessa just posted your address and work schedule on Twitter." His voice was tight with controlled anger, his fingers gripping his phone so hard his knuckles turned white. My blood ran cold. "She what?" The room seemed to tilt slightly. The familiar surroundings of Tyrese's living room, the gaming posters on the walls, the mismatched furniture, the stack of textbooks from his night classes, suddenly feeling strange and distant. She framed it as a warning to people in the area to be careful around an unstable person, but it's basically an invitation for harassment. He showed me the screen, where Vanessa's tweet displayed my full address and the days and times I usually worked at McDonald's, all under the guise of public safety. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, and sure enough, there were already strange cars driving slowly past my apartment complex according to my neighbor's texts. Someone had taped a note to my door with the word "liar" scrawled across it in jagged red letters. The photo my neighbor sent showed the paper fluttering in the breeze, the red ink looking uncomfortably like blood against the white of my door. "You can't go home," Tyrese said firmly. "You're staying here tonight." His tone left no room for argument, and honestly, I didn't have the energy to protest. The thought of returning to my apartment, of wondering if someone was watching the building or waiting for me, was too much to bear. That night, huddled on Tyrese's couch with a blanket pulled up to my chin, I felt more alone than ever. Even with friends supporting me, even with other women coming forward, Vanessa and Derek seemed to be winning. They had the platform, the audience, the resources. All I had was the truth, and it didn't seem to be enough. The apartment was quiet, except for the occasional car passing on the street below, and the soft hum of the refrigerator. Tyrese had gone to bed hours ago, but sleep eluded me completely. Every noise made me tense. Every shadow seemed threatening. I can't keep living like this, I whispered to the dark room. The words hung in the air, a confession to no one but myself. The blanket Tyrese had given me smelled like fabric softener and faintly of his cologne, comforting scents that should have helped me relax but couldn't overcome the anxiety coursing through me. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. The blue light illuminated my face in the darkness, casting eerie shadows across the unfamiliar ceiling. I know what Derek did to you. I have proof. Meet me tomorrow at Riverside Park, 2 p.m., by the fountain. I stared at the message for a long time, my mind racing. Who could it be? Another of Derek's exes? Someone who had witnessed something? Or was it a trap? Derek or one of his friends trying to lure me out? The possibilities kept me awake until dawn began to lighten the sky outside Tyrese's windows. I showed the text to Tyrese in the morning. It's a trap, he said immediately. Don't go. He was making coffee in his small kitchen, the rich aroma filling the apartment and almost, but not quite, masking the smell of fear that seemed to cling to me these days. But what if it's not? What if someone really does have evidence? I leaned against his counter, watching as he poured the dark liquid into mismatched mugs. The morning light streamed through his kitchen window, creating patterns on the worn linoleum floor. Then they can send it to you. Meeting a stranger in a park after Vanessa just doxed you? No way. He handed me a mug, his eyes serious with concern. The coffee was hot and strong, exactly how I liked it. Tyrese had been paying attention to these small details about me. He was right, of course. But desperation makes you consider options you'd normally dismiss. I couldn't go back to my apartment. I couldn't go to work. My life was unraveling, and I needed something, anything, to turn the tide. The walls felt like they were closing in, options disappearing one by one. I'll go with you, Tyrone offered when I called him. We'll scope it out first, make sure it's safe. His voice was calm and practical, offering a solution rather than just pointing out the dangers. Tyrese reluctantly agreed to the plan, but insisted on coming too. Safety in numbers, he said grimly. He spent the next hour outlining a detailed plan, where each of us would position ourselves, what code words we'd use if something seemed off, exactly how long we'd wait before approaching. The next day, we arrived at Riverside Park 30 minutes early. The day was overcast but warm, the park less crowded than usual due to the threatening rain. Tyrone positioned himself on a bench with a clear view of the fountain, pretending to read a book. Tyrese and I took a walking path that circled the area, keeping our distance but maintaining visual contact. At exactly 2 p.m., a woman approached the fountain. She was in her 40s, well-dressed, with an anxious expression as she checked her watch repeatedly, her fingers fidgeting with her purse strap. Her hair was styled in a neat bob, and she wore a light cardigan despite the warmth of the day, as if she needed the extra layer for security. I don't recognize her, I whispered to Tyrese. We were partially hidden behind a large oak tree, watching from about 50 yards away. A couple with a stroller passed between us and the fountain, momentarily blocking our view. Me neither. Let's wait and see who she meets. Tyrese's hand rested lightly on my back, a reassuring presence as we observed the woman, but no one else approached. After 10 minutes, the woman took out her phone, frowned at it, then sat down on the fountain's edge. Her shoulders slumped slightly, and she glanced around with increasing frequency, her movements becoming more agitated. I think she's the one who texted you, Tyrese said. She looks like she's waiting for someone. A light drizzle had started to fall, droplets catching in my hair and on my eyelashes, but the woman made no move to leave or seek shelter. Or she's bait, and someone else is watching to see if I show up. I scanned the surrounding area, the playground to our left, the jogging path to our right, the row of trees behind the fountain. Any of those places could conceal someone watching us. We debated for another 5 minutes before I made a decision. I'm going to talk to her. You stay back and watch. If anything seems off, call me immediately. The rain was falling more steadily now, creating small puddles on the path and darkening the woman's cardigan with moisture. Before Tyrese could protest, I walked toward the fountain, my heart pounding in my ears. Each step felt like it took enormous effort, my legs heavy with fear but propelled forward by desperate hope. The woman looked up as I approached, her eyes widening in recognition. Jade? She asked tentatively. There was something familiar about her features, something I couldn't quite place but that nagged at the edges of my memory. I nodded, keeping a safe distance. You wanted to meet me? I remained standing while she sat, giving myself the advantage of height and a quicker escape if needed. She glanced around nervously, her hands twisting together. Yes, first period. I'm Derek's mother, Patricia. The words hit me like a physical blow, and I took an involuntary step backward. My heart nearly stopped. His mother? The resemblance was clear now. She had the same shaped eyes as Derek, the same slight dimple in her left cheek when she frowned. Please don't leave, she said quickly, seeing my expression. I'm not here to defend him. I'm here because I can't stay silent anymore. Her voice cracked on the last word, and I saw genuine anguish in her eyes. Patricia had been watching the videos her son and Vanessa were posting. At first, she'd believed Derek's version of events, that I was unstable, that I'd made false accusations. But then she'd found something while cleaning his old room at her house. The rain fell around us as she spoke, creating a curtain of sound that made our conversation feel private despite being in a public park. A journal, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Derek kept a journal during your relationship. He wrote about what he did to you, in detail, how he planned it, how he enjoyed it, and you weren't the first. She clutched her purse tighter, her knuckles white with tension. My legs felt weak. I sank onto the fountain edge, keeping distance between us. The stone was cold and wet beneath me, but I barely noticed. Why are you telling me this? The sound of the fountain's water mixing with the rainfall created a constant white noise around us. Because it's wrong, she said simply. What he's doing to you is wrong. What he did to those other girls was wrong. I've enabled him for too long, making excuses, believing his lies. I can't do it anymore. Her face showed the weight of her guilt, lines of sorrow etched around her eyes and mouth. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small black notebook, worn at the edges. Here, it's all in here. Pages 43 through 67 are about you specifically. The journal was slightly damp from the rain, its cover darkened with moisture. I stared at the notebook, afraid to touch it. Why would you give me this? He's your son. A raindrop fell from my hair onto my cheek, mimicking a tear I was too shocked to shed. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. Because I failed as a mother. I didn't raise him to be this person. person, and I can't let him destroy another young woman's life. Her voice broke completely on the last sentence, and she covered her mouth with her hand, trying to compose herself. I took the notebook with shaking hands. Have you read all of it? The cover was smooth and cool against my palm, innocuous looking for something that contained such darkness. She nodded, looking ashamed. Yes, it's disturbing. He needs help, professional help, and you need protection from him. She stood up, adjusting her purse strap on her shoulder. I've made an appointment with a lawyer tomorrow. I'm going to make a formal statement about finding the journal. It won't undo what he's done, but maybe it will help stop what he's doing now. As Patricia walked away, Tyrese and Tyrone rushed over. I showed them the notebook, and we flipped through it together right there in the park, huddled under a tree for shelter from the rain. What we found was sickening. Derek had meticulously documented his abuse, not out of guilt, but as some kind of trophy collection. He described how he'd isolated me, manipulated me, hurt me, and he'd done the same to others before me. The pages were filled with his neat handwriting, detailing incidents I had tried so hard to forget. The time he'd accidentally spilled hot coffee on my lap when I'd tried to leave during an argument. The night he'd held my wrists so tightly they bruised, then convinced me I'd done it to myself in my sleep. The calculated way he'd turned my friends against me, telling them I was becoming unstable and needed space. Most disturbing of all were the recent entries about Vanessa. He wasn't dating her because he cared about her. He was using her as a weapon against me. V is the perfect tool, he'd written. So desperate for attention, she'll do anything I ask. Once I'm done with Jay, I'll break V the same way. The words were chilling in their calculated cruelty, written with the same detached tone he might use to describe a business strategy. We need to take this to the police, Tyrese said immediately. The rain had plastered his hair to his forehead, but he didn't seem to notice or care. His focus was entirely on the journal and what it meant for our situation. But I hesitated. What if they don't believe it's real? What if they think I wrote it myself? The fear that had become my constant companion surged again, whispering all the ways this could go wrong. It's in his handwriting, Tyrone pointed out, and his mother can testify that she found it in his room. He had opened his jacket to shield the journal from the rain, protecting the evidence that might finally vindicate me. Would she, though? Would she really testify against her own son? The question hung in the air between us, as heavy as the rain clouds overhead. We decided to scan every page of the journal first, creating digital backups. Then Tyrone, who had a friend in the police department, arranged for us to meet with a detective who specialized in domestic violence cases. The rain had stopped by the time we reached the police station, but puddles dotted the parking lot, reflecting the gray sky above. Detective Nowak was a stern-faced woman with kind eyes. She listened carefully as I explained the situation, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. Her office was small but organized, with file folders stacked neatly on her desk and domestic violence resource posters on the walls. When I showed her the journal, her expression darkened. This is extremely concerning, she said. Not just the documented abuse, but the current harassment campaign. The doxing alone is potentially criminal. She flipped through the journal, her frown deepening with each page. So you can help? I asked, trying not to sound too desperate. My hands were clasped tightly in my lap to keep them from shaking, my nails digging into my palms. We can certainly investigate, she said carefully, but I want to be honest with you. Cases like this are complicated. The journal is compelling evidence, but we'd need his mother to confirm its authenticity. And even then, it might not be enough for criminal charges without additional evidence. The fluorescent lights of her office cast harsh shadows, highlighting the lines of concern on her face. My heart sank. So there's nothing you can do? The familiar feeling of helplessness threatened to overwhelm me again, the brief hope I'd felt at finding the journal starting to fade. I didn't say that, Detective Nowak replied. We can start by issuing a cease and desist order regarding the harassment, and I can help you file for a restraining order against both Derek and Vanessa, based on the doxing incident. She pulled out some forms from her desk drawer, her movements efficient and purposeful. It wasn't everything I'd hoped for, but it was a start. As we left the police station, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief that someone in authority was finally taking me seriously, but frustration that justice still seemed so far away. The sky had cleared somewhat, patches of blue appearing between the clouds, mirroring my cautious optimism. What now? I asked Tyrese as we walked to his car. The parking lot was still wet from the rain, puddles reflecting our images as we passed. Now we use what we have, he said firmly. The journal, the restraining order, the other victims' testimonies. We build our case piece by piece. His confidence was reassuring, a solid presence beside me when everything else felt uncertain. But Vanessa and Derek weren't going to make it easy. The next day, they escalated their campaign yet again. Vanessa posted a tearful video claiming she'd received death threats from my supporters. She showed screenshots of threatening messages, carefully editing out the usernames. The video was filmed in what looked like her bedroom, soft lighting and strategically placed decorative pillows creating a backdrop that made her look vulnerable and innocent. I'm literally shaking right now, she sobbed into the camera, her mascara artfully smudged. All because I stood by someone I love who was falsely accused. Is this what feminism has come to? Attacking other women for supporting men? She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her hand trembling just enough to be noticeable. The comments were flooded with sympathy and outrage on her behalf. Hashtag I stand with Vanessa, that started trending on Twitter. People who had never met either of us were taking sides in a battle they knew nothing about. The online world had become a jury passing judgment based on carefully crafted performances rather than facts. And then came the final blow. Vanessa somehow got hold of an old voicemail I'd left for my therapist during a particularly dark period after the breakup with Derek. I later learned that Derek had once borrowed my phone to call his mom during our relationship. He must have saved the number then and used it to social engineer his way into getting my private therapy records. In the voicemail, I'd talked about having suicidal thoughts, about feeling like no one would believe me. It had been a moment of raw vulnerability, meant only for the ears of the person I trusted to help me through my darkest time. The recording was slightly distorted, my voice thick with tears as I described the hopelessness that had consumed me. She posted it with the caption, "Listen to the unstable voice of someone who would make false accusations. This is what mental illness sounds like. Hashtag pray for Jade." The violation was so profound, so deeply personal, that I couldn't even cry. I just sat on Tyrese's couch, staring at the wall, feeling something inside me break. The living room was quiet except for the sound of my breathing, which seemed too loud, too ragged. Outside, life continued. People walking by on the sidewalk, cars passing, birds singing, oblivious to the fact that my most private moment had just been exposed to the world. "That's it," Tyrese said, his voice shaking with rage. "This ends now." He was pacing again, his footsteps heavy with purpose, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He called Tyrone Tyrone, who came over immediately. Together with Hannah, Grace, and Laura, Derek's other victims who had agreed to help, we formed what Tyrone jokingly called the Justice League. The nickname brought a brief smile to my face despite everything, the first time I'd smiled in days. Our plan was simple but risky. We would create our own social media campaign, but instead of directly attacking Derek and Vanessa, we would focus on sharing resources about domestic violence, gaslighting, and post-separation abuse. We would talk about our experiences without naming names, using hashtags that would reach the same audience Vanessa was targeting. And most importantly, we would leak carefully selected pages from Derek's journal, the ones that showed his pattern of abuse without revealing the most personal details of what he'd done to each of us. "Are you sure about this?" Hannah asked me. Her eyes were concerned but determined, her hand steady on my arm. We were all gathered in Tyrese's living room, laptops open, strategy notes spread across the coffee table. "Once we do this, there's no going back. They'll escalate even further." "I'm sure," I said, finding my voice at last. "I'm done being afraid. I'm done letting them control the narrative." The words came out stronger than I expected, surprising even me with their conviction. We launched our campaign the next morning. Grace, who worked in marketing, helped us craft messages that were clear, concise, and impossible to dismiss as crazy. Laura, who had a large following on her beauty blog, shared her story first, talking about an unnamed ex who had threatened her with revenge adult films. Hannah posted next, describing the isolation tactics her former boyfriend had used, and I shared last, posting a single page from Derek's journal where he described his system for breaking down a woman's self-esteem. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Women began sharing their own stories of abuse and gaslighting. Domestic violence advocates reached out to offer support, and most surprisingly, several of Derek's male friends contacted me privately to say they'd always suspected something was off about him. One sent screenshots of concerning texts Derek had sent about putting me in my place. Another described witnessing Derek's explosive anger over minor issues. Pieces of the puzzle were coming together, creating a picture that others could finally see. For the first time, the tide seemed to be turning, but Vanessa and Derek weren't going down without a fight. That evening, as I was helping Tyrese make dinner, my phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. The kitchen was warm and fragrant with the smell of the pasta sauce Tyrese was stirring, creating an incongruous backdrop for what was about to happen. "Hello?" I balanced the phone between my ear and shoulder as I chopped vegetables for a salad, the knife rhythmically hitting the cutting board. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" Vanessa's voice was ice cold, all pretense of the tearful victim gone, turning people against us with your little pity party. The venom in her voice was startling after the carefully cultivated vulnerability she showed online. "I'm just telling the truth, Vanessa. Something you should try sometime." I set down the knife, my appetite suddenly gone. Tyrese looked up from the stove, his expression questioning. She laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "The truth? You wouldn't know the truth if it slapped you in the face. And trust me, reality is about to hit you hard." The threat was unmistakable, sending a chill down my spine despite the warmth of the kitchen. "Is that a threat?" I moved away from Tyrese, not wanting him to hear Vanessa's words and become more worried than he already was. "It's a promise. You have no idea what's coming for you." Before I could respond, she hung up. I stared at my phone, a chill running down my spine. "What was that about?" Tyrese asked, noticing my expression. He turned down the heat under the sauce, giving me his full attention. "Vanessa," I said. "She's planning something." The kitchen suddenly felt less safe, less warm, as if her threat had physically entered the space with us. We didn't have to wait long to find out what. The next morning, I woke up to find #JadeIsOverParty trending on Twitter. Vanessa had orchestrated a coordinated attack, having her followers mass report all my social media accounts for harassment and threatening behavior. My Instagram was temporarily suspended. My Twitter was locked. Even my professional LinkedIn account had been flagged for review. In one swift move, she had silenced my voice just as people were starting to listen. But she didn't stop there. Someone, and I had no doubt who, had sent an anonymous tip to my landlord claiming I was running an illegal business from my apartment. When I called to explain, he seemed skeptical, mentioning that he'd also received complaints about excessive noise and concerning behavior. His voice was cold and distant, nothing like the friendly tone he'd used when I first moved in. "I've never had a complaint before," I protested. The phone felt slippery in my sweaty palm as panic began to rise. My apartment was the only safe space I had left, and now even that was being threatened. "Well, I've received several in the past week," he replied stiffly. "I'll need to conduct an inspection." The implication was clear. He was looking for a reason to evict me. It was a coordinated effort to isolate me completely, cut off my social media presence, threaten my housing, already taken away my job. They were trying to erase me, to make me so desperate that I'd back down. The walls were closing in, options disappearing one by one, just as Derek had done during our relationship. But they had miscalculated, because this time, I wasn't alone. When I told our Justice League what was happening, they sprang into action. Tyrone helped me set up new accounts under slightly different names. Grace used her marketing contacts to get my Instagram suspension reviewed. Laura offered to let me stay with her if I lost my apartment. And Tyrese never left my side. "We're going to get through this," he promised, his arm around my shoulders as we sat on his couch, strategizing our next move. "They think they can break you, but they don't know how strong you are." His words were simple but powerful, a reminder that I had survived Derek once and could do it again. I leaned against him, exhausted but determined. "I just don't understand why Vanessa hates me so much. What did I ever do to her?" The question had been bothering me for weeks. The intensity of her animosity seemed disproportionate to our brief interaction. "Nothing," Tyrese said firmly. "This isn't about you. It's about her own insecurities. And Derek is using that, manipulating her just like he did with you." His insight made perfect sense. Vanessa's behavior had always been about her need for attention, her fear of being overlooked. I thought about the journal entries describing Vanessa as a tool to be used and discarded. As much as she had hurt me, I couldn't help feeling a twinge of concern for her. She had no idea what was coming once Derek was done with her. The cycle of abuse was so clear from the outside, yet so impossible to see when you were caught in it. "Maybe we should try to talk to her," I suggested. "Show her the journal entries about her." The idea formed slowly, a recognition that Vanessa was both perpetrator and potential victim in this twisted situation. Tyrese looked skeptical. "You think she'd listen?" His doubt was reasonable. Vanessa had shown no willingness to hear my side so far. "Probably not, but I have to try. Otherwise, I'm no better than them, using her as a pawn in this twisted game." The realization felt important. Maintaining my humanity, my empathy, even towards someone who had shown me none, was a way of ensuring Derek hadn't broken something essential inside me. We debated the best approach. A direct message would likely be ignored or used against me. A public post would seem like an attempt tack. Finally, we decided on a neutral third party, someone Vanessa might actually listen to. The solution wasn't perfect, but it was the best option we had. Marcus had remained on the periphery of the drama, not taking sides but not cutting me off either. He and Vanessa had been friends before all this started, and she still occasionally commented on his posts. I called him, explained what we'd found in the journal, and asked if he'd be willing to talk to Vanessa. My hands shook slightly as I made the call, afraid of another rejection, another door closing. I don't know, Jade, he said hesitantly. This whole situation is really messed up. I don't want to get more involved. His reluctance was clear in his voice, the caution of someone who didn't want to be dragged into a conflict. I understand, I said, trying to hide my disappointment. I just thought, if she knew what Derek was really planning, I let the sentence hang, hoping he would fill in the blank himself. There was a long pause. Send me the journal pages, he finally said. I'll think about it. It wasn't a commitment, but it was something. A small opening in what had felt like an impenetrable wall. It wasn't much, but it was something. I sent Marcus the scanned pages where Derek described his plans for Vanessa after he was done with Jade. Then I waited, trying not to get my hopes up. The hours crawled by, each notification on my phone making my heart race before I realized it wasn't from Marcus. 2 days later, Marcus called me back. I talked to her, he said without preamble. His voice was subdued, serious in a way I hadn't heard before. And I held my breath, afraid to hope, but unable to stop myself. She didn't believe me at first, said the journal was probably fake, but then he hesitated. Then I told her about something Derek had written that I hadn't mentioned before. A specific gift he was planning to give her, a necklace with a phoenix pendant. Apparently he'd just given it to her the day before, with the exact same speech about rising from the ashes that he'd written in the journal. The coincidence was too specific to dismiss, and Marcus's voice reflected his own surprise at the confirmation. Did that convince her? I paced Tyrese's living room as I spoke, too anxious to sit still. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the blinds, creating stripes of light and dark across the floor. I think it shook her. She got really quiet, asked to see the actual journal pages. I sent them to her and she just disappeared. Hasn't responded to any messages since. Concern edged his voice, not just for me now, but for Vanessa too. I didn't know whether to feel hopeful or worried. Had Vanessa finally seen the truth, or was she planning some new form of retaliation? The uncertainty was almost worse than knowing for sure that another attack was coming. The answer came that evening, in the form of a text from an unknown number. We need to talk, in person, just you and me. No Tyrese, no Derek. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., coffee shop on Maple Street. The message was brief and direct, leaving no doubt about who it was from even without a signature. I showed the text to Tyrese. It has to be Vanessa. He read it several times, his brow furrowed in concentration. It could be a trap, he warned. Derek could have her phone. His protective instinct was in full force, his body tense with concern. I have to take the chance, I said. This might be our only opportunity to end this. The possibility of resolving the situation, of finally being free from the constant attacks, was too tempting to ignore. We argued about it for hours. Tyrese insisted on coming with me, waiting outside the coffee shop in case something went wrong. I finally agreed, on the condition that he wouldn't interfere unless I texted him a specific code word. We settled on pineapple, random enough that I wouldn't use it accidentally in normal conversation. The next day, I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early, choosing a table with a clear view of both the entrance and the emergency exit. My hands were sweating as I ordered a latte I knew I wouldn't drink. The coffee shop was moderately busy, with the hum of conversations and the hiss of the espresso machine creating a background noise that was both comforting and useful. No one would overhear our conversation. At exactly 3 p.m., Vanessa walked in. She looked different, smaller somehow, without her usual confident swagger. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her normally perfect makeup slightly smudged. The designer outfit and carefully styled hair were still there, but something essential had changed, as if the frame remained but the picture inside had altered completely. She sat down across from me without a word, staring at the table between us. The silence stretched uncomfortably, broken only by the ambient noise of the coffee shop, cups clinking, the bell over the door jingling as customers came and went, music playing softly from overhead speakers. Thank you for coming, I said, breaking the silence. My voice came out steadier than I expected, given how rapidly my heart was beating. She looked up, her expression unreadable. I didn't come for you. I came for me. The words were clipped, defensive, but lacking the venom I'd grown accustomed to hearing from her. Okay, I said carefully. What do you want to talk about? I kept my hands wrapped around my coffee cup, more for something to hold on to than any desire to drink it. Vanessa took a deep breath. I want to know if it's true. The things in the journal. Did he really do those things to you? Her voice wavered slightly on the question, betraying the emotion she was trying to hide. I met her gaze steadily. Yes, all of it, and worse. The simple truth, stated without embellishment or drama, seemed to hit her harder than any emotional appeal could have. She flinched slightly. And the other girls? Hannah, Grace, Laura? Her fingers traced nervous patterns on the table's surface, her perfectly manicured nails catching the light from the window beside us. Yes, they're all telling the truth. I watched her face carefully, looking for any sign that she was recording this conversation, or setting me up somehow. But all I saw was confusion, and the dawning of a terrible realization. Vanessa was silent for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the table. He's been different lately, since we started the videos. Controlling, checking my phone, getting angry over little things. The admission seemed to cost her, each word dragged out reluctantly. My heart ached despite everything she'd done to me. I recognized the signs all too well. The gradual escalation, the increasing control, the unpredictable anger, all hallmarks of the pattern I'd experienced myself. Vanessa, you need to get away from him. Now before it gets worse. She laughed bitterly. And go where? Back to the friend group that hates me now? Back to my parents who think I'm a social media star dating a successful guy? I have nowhere to go. The desperation in her voice was familiar. The same trapped feeling I'd experienced when trying to leave Derek. That's what he wants you to think, I said gently. That's how it starts. He isolates you until you believe you have no options. I leaned forward slightly, trying to convey the urgency without scaring her off. But you do have options. There are resources, people who can help. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't know, she whispered, about what he did to you. Not really. He told me you were unstable, that you'd made it all up, and I wanted to believe him because she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Because you were jealous, I finished for her. Because you thought the guys liked me better than you. The realization wasn't new, but hearing it acknowledged felt significant somehow. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. It's so stupid, so petty, and now I've ruined your life for nothing. Her mascara smudged slightly as she wiped at her eyes, a small human imperfection in her usually perfect appearance. Not for nothing, I said. You did it because Derek manipulated you, just like he manipulated me and all the others. That's what he does. I offered her a napkin from the dispenser on the table, a small gesture of kindness that seemed to surprise her. Vanessa wiped her eyes, suddenly looking determined. I want to fix this. I want to tell the truth. Her chin lifted slightly, a glimpse of strength emerging through the vulnerability. I stared at her, hardly daring to hope. You'd do that? Publicly admit everything? The possibility seemed too good to be true after weeks of relentless attacks. Yes, she said firmly. I'll take down all the videos. I'll post the truth. I'll even go to the police with you if you want. Her hands stopped their nervous movement, settling flat on the table with new resolve. It was more than I dared hope for. But as I looked at Vanessa, really looked at her, I saw something that made me pause. A faint bruise on her wrist, partially covered by her bracelet. The same kind of bruise I used to hide with jewelry. The discoloration was subtle, yellowish purple, a few days old, but unmistakable to someone who knew what to look for. Vanessa, I said carefully. Has Derek hurt you? Physically, I mean. I kept my voice low, aware of the other customers around us, the barista wiping down the counter nearby. Her eyes widened, and for a moment I thought she would deny it. Then her face crumpled. Just once, she whispered. Last night, when I confronted him about the journal, he said I was being crazy, that I was turning against him just like you did. He grabbed my wrist so hard, I thought he was going to break it. She pulled back her bracelet slightly, revealing the full extent of the bruise, finger marks clearly visible against her skin. In that moment, everything changed. Vanessa wasn't just my tormentor anymore. She was Derek's newest victim. And no matter what she'd done to me, I couldn't leave her in his clutches. The realization was immediate and absolute. The cycle had to stop, even if it meant helping someone who had tried to destroy me. Listen to me, I said, leaning forward. You're not going back to him. Not ever. Do you understand? My voice was firm but gentle, the same tone I wished someone had used with me when I was trying to leave. She nodded, looking both terrified and relieved. But where will I go? What will I do? The questions came in a rush, the practical concerns of someone contemplating a major life change without any preparation. First, we're going to document that bruise, I said, slipping into the practical mode I developed after my own escape. Then we're going to call Detective Nowak, and then you're going to stay with Laura until we figure out next steps. The plan formed as I spoke, each piece falling into place with surprising clarity. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a sense of clarity and purpose. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about stopping Derek once and for all, before he could hurt anyone else. The coffee shop continued its normal rhythm around us, people chatting, ordering drinks, going about their day, while at our table, something profound had shifted. As we left the coffee shop together, Tyrese watching in amazement from his car across the street, I realized something important. The path to justice wasn't going to be a dramatic showdown or a viral video exposing the truth. It was going to be this, one step at a time, one truth at a time, one survivor supporting another. Vanessa looked at me as we walked to Tyrese's car. The afternoon sun highlighted the dark circles under her eyes, the strain of the past weeks visible in her face. Why are you helping me after everything I did? Her question was genuine, confusion mixing with gratitude in her voice. I thought about it for a moment. Because no one deserves what Derek does to people, not even you. The answer came easily, a truth I hadn't fully recognized until I said it aloud. She gave me a small, sad smile. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Her shoulders hunched slightly, as if expecting rejection even now. This isn't about forgiveness, I said honestly. It's about breaking the cycle. It's about being better than them. And as I said it, I realized it was true. This wasn't about being a saint or taking the moral high ground. It was about refusing to let Derek's poison spread any further, refusing to become the thing I hated. As Tyrese drove us to the police station, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Real, substantial hope that this nightmare might finally be ending. The city passed by outside the car windows, people walking dogs, children playing in parks, life continuing in all its ordinary beauty, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I might have a place in that ordinary world again. The road ahead would still be difficult. There would be statements to give, evidence to present, social media fallout to manage. Vanessa would have to publicly retract her accusations, which would bring its own wave of backlash. Derek would fight back, possibly harder than ever. The legal system might still fail us, as it fails so many victims of domestic violence. But for the first time, I wasn't facing it alone. I had Tyrese and Tyrone, Hannah and Grace and Laura. And now, improbably, I had Vanessa too. The alliance was fragile, built on shared trauma rather than friendship, but it was real, and it was powerful. Sometimes justice isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with sirens and handcuffs. Sometimes it's quiet. A conversation in a coffee shop, a truth finally spoken, a hand extended to someone who doesn't deserve it but desperately needs it. Sometimes healing begins not with grand gestures, but with small acts of courage. The courage to speak, to listen, to believe, to help. As we pulled into the police station parking lot, I took a deep breath. This was just the beginning of the end, but it was a beginning. And after everything I'd been through, that was enough for now.